I'm Coach Mike McKay and joined today by Adam Artz. And I want to tell you that you're going to be blown away by the fact that Adam, as a civil engineer, has designed more than 50 million with an M square feet of manufacturing, distribution, production, and civil space on 20,000 acres. And if you're curious, that's a lot. So welcome to the show, Adam. Thanks for joining us today.
Glad to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about your backstory. Where were you born? Where do you live? Hobbies?
Well, be prepared to be underwhelmed. Where I'm from, I grew up in the inner city of Milwaukee and turned into a split family that split time between the major metropolis of West Dallas and Milwaukee. And then I went through the West Dallas school system and ultimately moved on to college in state at UW-Platteville. After college, I returned to West Dallas to be close to our parents, and eventually we moved out of the West Dallas system just purely for schools, and now live in Brookfield, Wisconsin. So not too much to report there.
I mean, that might be a little low key with 50 million square feet under your belt. So how did you end up in civil engineering?
Oh, great question. One of the great things about I went to West Dallas Central. One of the great things that I found there was something called Work World. It's got a more impressive name than what it actually was, but it was a program where if you asked me as a teenager, the only thing I focused on was half day in school, half day working somewhere. And so if you look at it now, and my maturity or wisdom would say it was basically a work study that allowed you to get some real life career experience while you're still in the bounds of high school. So I entered that program and I was paired up with 5 or 6 different interviews. And I found a lot of things I didn't want to do. Like I interviewed at GE Medical in West Milwaukee, and I would have been like one of like 400 people sitting in the exact room. So I passed on that opportunity
Yeah.
because it just didn't feel right for me. But I moved into internship, basically a high school co-op, if you will, with the City of West Dallas Civil Engineering Department. And so my time there was really 4 hours a day for the school year, being trained by civil engineers. And so I didn't even know what civil engineering was at the time. So that component was just basically a big marketing program every day. Go into civil engineering, go into civil engineering, look at all the great things we're doing. And I've always been fascinated by construction. And since there was a element of construction in tandem with this engineering thing that I was learning, I really took the guidance of those engineers in that department, and I decided to go to school for it at UW-Platteville.
Yeah, we coached an engineering company when I started at it. Had no idea how much stuff civil engineering is involved in and all the things that you do. What might surprise outsider or what's kind of a cool story that you've been involved in that those of us who don't do civil engineering would be like, hey, that's cool.
Well, I'll give you a recent one. For me, the idea of working on projects isn't that gratifying or rewarding. It's an element of my career is more rewarding my family. But recently we got, I think the word is conned, on going to a meeting at a local soccer club that my son belongs to. And so the soccer club was exploring the idea of upgrading their facilities, and they really didn't have an idea of what they wanted, or needed, or what they could even do. And so I was invited on the premise of having a beer with one of my friends, but it was really a pitch by a soccer club to get us to donate some services to this field, or I should say soccer complex. And so
Yeah.
for me, it was okay, run of the mill. We can provide civil engineering services. Wonderful. We'll be glad to figure that out. But by the end of it, you look at the finances, a lot of these pro bono type elements that are out there, and you look at what you can or can't do. So we decided to, as me and my partners, to donate this soccer field, design and elements, and what started out as providing civil engineering services really turned into consulting on how to get it approved, how to go through the motions of getting there. And I promise you, I'm getting to the point of my story here. For us, it
You're
was
good.
another
You're
day in the
good.
halls of Pinnacle. But when my son found out about it, again, he's in this soccer club. He thought it was the coolest thing that ever happened. And then the elements of, walking through, watching the progression of construction, watching the progression of, turning out this state-of-the-art soccer complex, the joy that he brought to all his friends, explaining, my dad did this, my dad did this, my dad did this. That element of it, kind of takes a mundane element and takes it personal. And I was like, oh, wow, you do really influence the lives of others. And so, I'm proud to say that, those improvements have been ongoing for the last 3 or 4 years. And now they have one of the nicest soccer complexes in the area. And an even better, thing for me is, I was able to talk to some of my friends in the construction world to donate a lot of stuff to it. So they ended up being, a really nice facility for not so high of a cost. So
Yeah.
it's those feel good things that really kind of stand out in my life is making a difference in my career and what I'm doing.
Yeah, I mean, our people hear from us all the time that our belief is only local businesses care enough about their localities to do things like that. And so, we share all this stuff because I want my kids to be able to live in a strong community. And it is true that only local people will do it. Like some of the big companies will throw money, but they won't get in and, uh, you know, create a soccer field. And if you're listening to this, I can assure you that creating a state-of-the-art soccer field is not a bulldozer and some topsoil. There's a whole bunch of work that has to go into creating a situation like that. So tell us a little bit more about Pinnacle. What's Pinnacle's focus? I see multi offices and kind of your journey through or into and growing up, quote unquote, growing up in Pinnacle.
Pinnacle is we have 4 offices kind of centered around Chicago, Milwaukee element, but we're a civil engineering firm that really touches on infrastructure and development type projects, if you will, real estate centric.
Mhm.
We provide consulting to everything from shopping centers to industrial distribution centers, to get people's ears perked up, Starbucks and restaurants and things like that, but all the way through single family subdivisions, multifamily complexes. We really touch everything that does um, development. And so our focus and our kind of niche, if you will, the reason I think Pinnacle's in business is because we touch everything from the inception of an idea all the way through operations of it. And I can kind of give a little bit more detail on that. The inception of an idea, it usually takes the guiding force of somebody to have a vision of how a community is going to be developed, whether it be the zoning and community development people on staff with a community or a developer that has a vision to take a raw piece of land and put something that they believe can be a successful development in a community. But the
Yeah.
inception of these ideas come from a lot of different sources and a lot of different people. If you think of a governing agency, you have federal funds, you have state funds, you have local funds, but you also have limitations of what communities can or cannot do. When you think of a real estate developer or a corporation, they have an end goal, such as I need a production facility, or we want to lease out space in a
Right.
store
Mixed
or
use or something.
yeah, absolutely. And so you have all kinds of different thoughts, all different kinds of ideas. And for us, we like to take all those ideas and kind of spit out something that we think will be successful, through planning, through research of codes, what can't be done, infrastructure that may be there, may not be there, or may be required. And so what we do is we kind of take that next step with an idea and kind of come up with feasibility studies, come up with, potential constraints or opportunities, and really kind of start setting the outside puzzle pieces, if you will, if you're doing the puzzle and say, okay, here's the bounds that we need to work in. Is this now feasible? And so
Hmm.
our clients are the ones that do all the heavy lifting on, financials and, funding and all that fun stuff to see if it's feasible. But if it's good for them and it can come back to us, all of a sudden we start designing things. We start, working on community engagement. We start working on needs analysis on whether, the infrastructure can handle it versus not, opportunities to provide it versus not. And,
Yeah.
we come out with this great idea of, this can be done. And then after that, it goes on to the engineering side of things where there are a whole bunch of people doing computations, a whole bunch of people doing construction documents and things like that. And at the end, we spit out something of, tangible viewing, something that people can understand what it is now, people can get on board or not. And, from those plans through permitting, through, getting approvals at local commissions, all the way through construction, we're
Mhm.
there every step of the way. And we have one caveat. We do everything outside of the building. So when we talk about 50 million square feet, we're the ones laying the infrastructure for somebody else
Sure.
to design the building itself, our friends in the architectural realm or a design build contractor. So we
Yeah.
we touch a lot of different things.
It's quite creative, isn't it? Like, I mean, you don't hear engineering, you're like, oh, those guys have to really be able to think kind of outside the box. But if somebody, you're looking at a big old plot of land and trying to figure out what can be on there and what's, the highest best use or whatever they call it. You guys have to figure all the pieces out that actually make the thing work and then design it.
Yeah, we as a firm need to work on both sides of our brain, the right and left-sided thinkers, with the creativity, but then, the cause effect, calculations.
Yeah.
And we do have that. That's why I think we're successful and why I think people keep coming back to us, that we're not giving a component of the success. We're kind of looking at the big picture and elements of creativity and black and white engineering mixed together. And
Yeah.
it all comes down to our employees. I can't say it's just me, but it's something that I think we have that under one roof where a lot of our competitors don't.
How about someone who pushed you or inspired you to stay in the field, get in the field, get past some of the challenges that you probably deal with, like all business people get to deal with?
Yeah, I've been lucky. I've had dozens of people help guide me, and part of it is the for lack of a better term, the willingness of myself to say, hey, this is what I'm struggling with. Can you guys help me, or you gals, or everyone help me, kind of come up with a solution. And I have a great network around me. But the element of basically helping is it takes a community approach. I'd be remiss if I could say there was one or two or three people that really contributed, but I could kind of lump it into three different groups if that's all right.
Sure.
Really it starts with the drive and the ability of the people here at Pinnacle. So I started the company in 2011 when I was 30, just 30 and a couple of days old.
Nice.
And so I realized that I couldn't do it by myself. So I really hired a group of people right away, and found some that were really instrumental in helping the business grow, and really some that weren't there but anything for a paycheck. And so where I'm going with this is now, call it 14 years later, we've sit in a situation where I have five partners, and my five partners are really described as people that were so important to the business, and the bleeding the core principles and guiding the operations, that why not make them equity partners. And so my partners eventually, they all didn't come at once, they all came at different times of the career, but they're the biggest driving force of why we keep going, because a company with any size, you struggle with how much you can or cannot manage and how much you can
Right.
or cannot control. So having that group of people that kind of bleeds those same principles as you is super important. And then you kind of go back to, obviously the one that I should have mentioned first is family. But my family, the fact that they're willing to let me, basically spend as much time as I
Yeah.
do in the pursuit of, the goals and objectives of Pinnacles. But it's also there's a lot of personal goals and objectives of, being the best, and, not compromising for minimum, that drive that. So my family's just got a huge impact on the way Pinnacle is today as well.
Yeah. How about your biggest learning so far, would you say, from starting and owning a business and having a partner, having partners? You
The
only get to pick
world is
one.
imperfect. It's just terribly imperfect. It doesn't matter how much you plan, how many goals and objectives you hit. At the end of the day, you can do 100% correct and still fail. And it's the idea of, we always strive for perfection, but what do you do in the event you don't get it is kind of the biggest, element I always look at. And, perseverance is, definitely a good thing, but having a sign of humility that, even if you did it right, you still might fail. And, treating failure as your ultimate, for lack of a better term, performance benchmark, is you don't want to fail. So every success is just not failing.
Yeah.
It's a situation where we really just, you got to wake up every day, forget what happened yesterday, remember it enough to build on those past failures to guide tomorrow's successes. But the world is imperfect, so it doesn't matter how good you're doing, there's always going to be a failure in there.
I think that's the best way, the best presentation I've ever heard anybody come up with on what happens during the day in an average place, right? Like I was just writing an article on acronyms and failure being, first attempt in learning, and I never used to believe that. And then I had all these failures, right? And I took all these lessons, and at some point got old enough to realize that's how I got to be who I was and the skills that I had. And now, as you look at, newer business owners, they're terrified of doing something that might be labeled a failure. But if you know how to do it, to your adding on to the imperfect part, if you already knew how to do it and you did it right the first time, you didn't get any learning. You just did something, right? Like, so as you guys grow and thrive and expand for all businesses, learning is the most valuable part. The way you phrase it is build on it for tomorrow, which is a perfect, example of the world being imperfect. But the, like you said, humility, the ability to take lessons is probably one of the biggest strengths that a business owner can have. So that's
Thank
awesome.
you. I appreciate those were very kind words. I'm often accused of embarrassing people because we talk about failures, and we don't talk about them to embarrass people. We talk about them to learn from them because the element of, having 85 or 90 employees, whatever we have, is if one person fails and you can get the entire rest of the group to learn from somebody's failure, it's just like they failed themselves. And so that humility word is a big deal. The ability to say that I did not do this perfect,
Right.
um, is something that we teach from day one, is that you're not being called out on the carpet to embarrass you, or you're being called out on the carpet as a case study so we all can be better. It's a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, not very many people, even when they get to that size of 85 people, will keep the culture of we're doing this for everybody to get better and increase the skills faster. But you have, like, one of the things that you have is 85 people learning lessons every day. And so your capability as an organization to grow and learn is faster than most people that when you're willing to put those things in place. So if y'all are listening to this, like, pay attention, because the ability to take lessons from the things that feel like we're tripping up, that's how you grow a business that can stay meaningful and sustainable for a long period of time. So what's next? What's the next big thing for you? You've already covered all the questions I had about your people. So what's the next big thing for you and for Pinnacle next 1 to 3 years or so?
Yeah, so we have this philosophy in our, and this is really came out of our strategic plan initiatives, and you're trying to figure out who we're going to be tomorrow because, we're great today, but we want to be better tomorrow. And there's not always exponential, kind of momentum that you can hit and take small concepts, but we're fighting for the microcosms that just keep our culture and keep those things happening. I would say our next big thing is, and this is a catchphrase, so don't laugh at me, transitioning from a startup company to a real business. And though we're, over $15 million a year in billings, we're a real business, but the
You
startup
are.
mentality has a lot of flexibility in it. You got to constantly evolve every day. You got to change your standards to meet the needs of your clients. And sometimes in the startup mentality, you overlook things. You overlook that consistency is sometimes more important than flexibility. And
Right.
and the reason I say that for Pinnacle itself is we're in an engineering world. Engineers, landscape architects, surveyors, we deal with all these finite elements, and we struggle with, the concept of a 99% is still a failure. We struggle with that because it's real. If there's something wrong, and we might have 50,000 bits of information in a plan set, or 47 steps to get from point A to point Z, and get ultimate perfection on that stuff. The startup mentality is say, hey, we got 25 out of the 26, the customer experience was there. They're going to keep hiring us, so keep going. And the business side of things, if you think of a 1980s MBA class, it's like, no, 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 no. We're going to switch to ISO, so everything's perfect every time. And
Mhm.
somewhere between the two is the
Yeah.
real life solution. But if there is a process in place that can get us to perfection every single time, spend the time, spend the effort. Let's try to get to 100% every time instead of 99.
Yeah.
And, I say that with an element of, after I just said 99% is a failure, I view it as a failure because if it doesn't go perfectly, we want to be better. And so we're trying to get from 99 to 100 every single time the first time. And that's where our thought process and effort is really going.
Yeah, I've been in an ISO certified company and we didn't do anything better. We didn't do better than 99% anyway, but there's this thing that happens in businesses where it becomes a thing. Like Vince Lombardi said, I don't know if you're a football fan, but at some point you have to turn the team over to the team. At some point you have to turn the business over to the business. You've created something that wants to do its work, right? Like at some point it becomes a machine of, I mean, this is not the right phrase, obviously, but chunking out products. And what it needs is everything correctly, just like running an engine, right? Everything needs to be put in there correctly so that when your products get chunked out, um, we say systematize the routine and humanize the exception. There's probably always going to be a 1% where you guys have to jump in and fix something, but 80, 90% of the time, the processes will, even though they might feel constricting, what's happening is you're giving them the business, turning the business to the business over to the business and giving it the best chance to succeed. So, I mean, that's a great thought process. You've horsepowering a business to 15 million is amazing. So I mean, to still think of it from a startup in the transition phase is super cool. And you're right. The machine just needs the extra pieces of data so that you guys don't have to, try to, like in a startup, you're like, hey, let's build the trampoline on the way out, on the way down. We'll fix it. We'll get it right. That's 25 out of 26. But at 85 or 90 employees and 50 million, you want you want the trampoline to be built at least holding it out in front of you when you hit the ground. So
Yeah,
that's
and we want
awesome.
to instill pride from top to bottom. We need everything to be at 100% once the team is done with it. Individual contributors, when you look at trying to get 100% accuracy or 100% performance, it's unachievable. And so
Sure.
when you look at it as, if it takes a team of 6 people to do quality control, quality assurance, fix things, guide the performance in a different direction, that's wonderful. But what we want to try to do is get them to be smaller teams. And we want to try to get everyone and, make up most of the statistics percentages I give. 100% of statistics I give are not factual. So don't,
That's right.
don't,
I
don't
got a
get hung
math
up on
degree and I do the
99%.
same thing.
We want somebody that if they're getting something 75% right to get to 80 or to 90 and not rely on the quality control. We want that quality assurance side of things to continue to evolve. So there's less focus on that final review to get it to where it needs to be. And so
Yeah.
that element for us is something I think we could spend infinite time on. So we're going to have to struggle on how much time do you want to get a 75 to an 80 or an 80 to an 85, knowing that it's still going to be 100% when it goes out. And
Yeah.
so that's where a little bit of trial and error, and that's where every individual is different. You have
Right.
aptitudes, you have the infamous work-life balance where if one person's working 50 hours a week and one working 40, you're gonna have all these different performance benchmarks. So we're trying to
Sure.
build that mousetrap in essence to a better model where we get, quality quicker instead of relying
Yeah.
on that end.
Yeah. When we in the ISO company, we use the production unit concept where every step had it's like some teams might be 2 people, some teams might be 8 people, depending on where it is in the process, so that you could be developing 1 or 2 people into their next role while they're doing production and they know that they have a limited number of steps that they need to get really good at so that the business can keep things flowing through. So one last question for you, and I never prep people for this question just because I'm curious what their answers will be. What's one question that you wish I would have asked you that I didn't?
That's a great question. I spend my life talking, so I view more questions as more questions, and that's it. Not really prepping it. Um, Let me think about that for 1 second. As most people ask me questions, they kind of come up with, where do you come up with these answers, and why do you answer in the way you do? And so I kind of have this stigma of being full of hot air and full of belief. The question that you might want to ask me is, in terms of engineers, why are you communicating more than you're showing me black and white kind of things? Because that's where I often get accused of not being an engineer, not going through that relationship.
Well, consider that question asked.
All
Why do you
right.
do that?
I'm a philosophical fella. It gets down to the why people do things, the social engineering just as much as it is the black and white of a computation working or not. I really pride myself on the experience and really the idea of, if the end goal works to 100%, that's wonderful, but the experience along the way is there. And so trying to get into the philosophicals usually gets you to the experience. And so I personally believe in, get another one of my fictitious standpoints, but instead of possession is 9/10 of the law, perception is 9/10 of the law. And so communication really is a fundamental in every single thing we do in life. It doesn't matter if you go to the store and you're trying to buy a pair of pants that you're looking for. You need communication to help
Yep.
you along the way. Same thing with engineering. And communication is one of those ones where we just try to overcome the stereotype in our industry that engineers can't talk, they can't communicate. They might say words, but it's not delivering the message it is. And so for me personally, whether it comes to the Pinnacle family that sits around me in all our offices or my personal family, we work on communication and trying to get your ideas from your head out through your mouth in a successful manner so everyone understands where you sit and there's no interpretation. Because as an engineer, I can say interpretation is the devil. It's
Yeah.
something that if it's interpretable, it's not exact and there's a problem. But in
Yeah.
communication, it's the same exact thing.
Yeah. I wrote some instructions for somebody the other day on something and they came up with, they were supposed to make a giraffe and it was a zebra. And I'm like, what? How could you possibly, how could you possibly not have followed that? But the reality is to your point, we all have different places we're starting from, different experiences, different belief systems and skill sets that you're trying to pull out. And the job of leadership, what you're trying to create is not engineering. It's engineering a company. So you're social engineering, all that stuff. You're right on in the tracks that are trip hazards for leaders. So super cool to hear about that. Adam Artz, founder and principal of Pinnacle Engineering. Thank you for joining us on the Success Chronicles today.
Mike, I appreciate the invite and thank you for today.
Appreciate your time.
All right, have a great one.
You too.